Hello everybody, welcome to the Eternal Card Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and today we are looking at the new promo card for January 2019. That is Star Reader Severin, a 2-1 with when you have 5 Shadow Influence and you play a relic, play Severin from your void with +1 Strength Exhausted. A repeating effect that allows Severin to effectively never die. And yeah, undying 2-drops, that's a little bit exciting. I would say that overall, like my initial impression of this, is that Severin has a few too many development scars to be effectively playable in a ranked or tournament scenario, but nonetheless he has very, very good closing potential, and he adds a little bit of early defense to Auralian and other shadow type relic matters decks, which can be pretty fun if you're actually wanting to play with the unkillable fun guy. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about this guy. He's and in the lore he's basically the Rasputin to Yushkov's I'm not actually sure what Yushkov's character would effectively be, but yeah, like Yushkov is sort of like and the whole Yushkov Svechia storyline is something of like an Anastasia type storyline, and you know, if you're like looking at like Disney villain versions of Rasputin, as well as just like the general myth of Rasputin, Rasputin is known as a sort of like unkillable and fairly unusual just sort of divinatory aid to various people. So yeah, Star Reader Severin definitely kind of fills that sort of plot, and I would say that you really can't have like this kind of setup without having a Rasputin type character, because yeah, Severin is just a lot of fun in terms of that kind of thing. So yeah, he's interesting. He's got a lot of good things going on. Okay, so the main things that are going on with this card are, first off, it is getting stronger and stronger every time that it comes back from the void, which is always a pretty handy thing, because if you don't have a way to permanently deal with this card, then it's something that can actually cause a threat over the course of the game and be a closer for the game later on when you're just playing multiple relics and constantly attacking or blocking with this card. That being said, Star Reader Severin is not very aggressive or particularly good at like pushing a lot of damage. Oftentimes, like, you don't need to really worry about him all that much, because you can just Varus favor him on turn 2, and then, like, after that, like, you don't have to deal with him for 4 or 5 more turns. Then he'll start coming back, and you can start doing a little bit more with him. Like, basically, like, he will get more and more aggressive, and eventually he'll close out the game. But if you're playing Relic Matters, it's possible that you'll have some sort of better finisher. And, yeah. The nice thing about Star Reader Severin is that you can mod him with all sorts of interesting abilities, because Eternal is a game where cards are changed permanently. If you give this card Killer, if you give this card Charge, if you give this card other options, Charge is actually completely useless on him, but if you give him other battle skills like Berserk and Lifesteal and Righteous Fury, or like basically any type of interesting buffs from other cards, then those buffs persist every time that Severin comes back, which means that you can repeat him over and over again with not only your own recursion effects, but every relic that you play. So eventually this card gets pretty ridiculous, and when you're playing him as a 2-drop early on just to sort of defend yourself, then like that's a pretty good way to get just a decent amount of flexibility over the core of an Aurelian or shadow-based relic deck. So yeah, that's ideally where he belongs. That being said, I think it was pretty clear that this card was strong, or like that ability was very strong. In typical Dawnwalker fashion, Star Reader Severin has 2 extremely serious drawbacks. The first is that he needs 5 Shadow Influence, that's Champion of Cunning Influence, to actually get the recursion benefit. And the second is that he is exhausted when he comes back into play. Both of those are the same restrictions that you see on Dawnwalker, and they brought Dawnwalker from being basically like the #1 card that you would play in time decks to the mostly not very often played card in time decks, sometimes a killer benefit, but basically like the card almost doesn't get used anymore because it's got a pretty steep influence requirement, and because like even though the overwhelming killer effect is still kind of powerful, the card really doesn't like do as much. You can't block with it anymore, which was one of the big benefits to it, and would have been one of the big benefits to Severin, where you can play relics and then you can get a guy who can actually actively block for you, but like that period of vulnerability is basically like the thing that Severin would ideally be covering. Unfortunately, he doesn't do that. When you play a relic, you still get smacked in the face here. You just get an extra card out of it that you can then devour or do other interesting things with. And to that extent, Severin is nonetheless a card advantage engine. He's quite capable of being played over and over over again, and in late game scenarios where you are basically just drawing relics off the top of your deck, playing them out, when you're Azendil's gifting your opponent, when you're basically just trying to get a bunch of stuff out and like just basically like playing from the top deck, Severin really adds a lot to the deck in the same way that Dawnwalkers add a lot to the deck. They make harsh rule situations and all of the like sort of card advantage control stuff suffer a lot more, and eventually Severin gets big enough to sort of reach across for lethal against other types of boards. That being said, I think that the period of vulnerability that Severin offers you is just too weak for him to be effectively played in most types of decks. We'll definitely try him in Relic Matters decks because there are some cool Shadow Relic Matters decks out there, and because he is like, yeah, not too badly statted for a 2-cost. Like, a 2/1 is reasonable enough to actually, like, block some of the early stuff, and then, like, the fact that it has so much late-game potential means that, like, there's a lot of things that you're probably not going to be investing in your later turns if you're playing a Relic Matters deck. So, like, basically, like, early-game cards are really hard to come by in these decks, and that's something where you can actually slot Severin in and get you just, like, a little bit more to deal with the sort of early aggro while eventually, like, dealing with the larger control lists, and, you know, gets you a little pressure, gets you a little bit of advantage. Yeah, so I would say overall the card is not terribly exciting, but I really, really like the lore style of it. I'm very glad that we have a Rasputin type character. Obviously, you can have a lot of fun with this card because continually recurring cards are very powerful, and you can do some ridiculous things with them if you have the right type of stuff going on. But that being said, like, there's just a few too many drawbacks on this card for it to be interesting. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll see some really interesting Relic Matters decks that actually get introduced to the meta as a result, but I would say that this is one of the weaker promo cards that has been released so far. Nonetheless, it's decent. It's definitely got some fun stuff going on with it. We'll build some Severin decks for sure, and I will definitely be putting out some more YouTube videos now that my throat is mostly healed from a series of bad colds, but we'll be showing off some new stuff with him pretty soon. So yeah, Severin should be out, I think, basically now. Once the YouTube video comes up, I think he'll already be out, but it's possible that it'll be like another hour or so. Regardless, he's supposed to come out today, the 23rd of January, so I hope you guys enjoy him, and yeah, he seems like he's pretty fun. Should be a delightful time, especially for like people who are playing I'd say if you're playing in like silver or bronze or gold, like this is the type of recursive effect that can actually get you a lot of advantage. So if you're just starting out with Eternal and you want to play some interesting like Relic Matters decks, this could actually be a pretty decent setup. I don't think it's got good enough rate to compete on like a really, really high level, but I hope that I'm wrong, and that's my basic opinion of it. So thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you hopefully tomorrow with more YouTube stuff, and I will be streaming with Severin and various other characters most of today. So looking forward to that, and I will see you guys there. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time. Cheers.